Hi, I'm Elizabeth Birch. Today on the show, the great civil rights leader, Congressman John Lewis.
I don't understand what gay people want from me.
But I remember being 16 and going, you know, I am totally gay.
It's not going to be easy. Get in the way. Get in trouble. Good trouble.
The baby Bushes have done a lot of damage, if you ask me.
Dr. King would have said that we don't have a right to discriminate against any human being.
Did you ever say to Ronald Reagan,
I may
this
have...
disease is going out of control?
I sent memos on AIDS.
Wake up and start marching on Washington, because if there ever was a time, it's now.
You finally said it, that you get special rights if you're straight and married.
Are you looking for a revolution?
We didn't wait for someone to tell us to do it. We just did it.
John Lewis made his way from outside Troy, Alabama, all the way to Nashville, Tennessee at the age of 17. As a very shy young man to make his way, not just into lunch counters and to make a statement, but into the arms of history. 18-year-old John Lewis boarded a Greyhound bus, a bus ride that helped change America.
I saw Martin Luther King Jr. standing behind the desk. I was so scared, so frightened. I didn't know what I was going to say to Martin Luther King Jr. This man had emerged as my hero, my leader, someone that I admired. And I was really scared to be in his presence.
Something clicked in the young John Lewis. Freedom was a possible dream. From Pike County, from the family farm, from this meeting came John Lewis, a new breed of American hero. Heroes that were willing to fight and die for freedom. It was time to move to the front of the bus, go to a better school, to eat at any lunch counter. Out of great courage, freedom happened. Rule of law happened. The bus stations were desegregated. A struggle shaped up in new places. There was one more bridge to cross before legislation was demanded, and that bridge was in Selma, Alabama. This sleepy southern bastion for segregation would become the gate through which freedom would march. If freedom could get through the dogs and the clubs and the horses and blue shirts, the freedom marchers needed a man of courage. They turned to John Lewis to lead them on what shamefully became known as Bloody Sunday.
We came to the apex of the bridge, and down below we saw a sea of blue. Alabama state troopers. They came toward us, beating us with nightsticks, bullwhips, trampling us with horses, releasing their tear gas. I was hit in the head by a state trooper with a nightstick and had a concussion at the bridge.
That revolution swept John Lewis into the Atlanta City Council. Finally, this son of a sharecropper won election to the United States House of Representatives. But it wasn't an easy journey. John Lewis had become democracy's missionary for Americans. One citizen, one vote. Equal opportunity, humanity. He changed America forever, and nothing symbolized that change better than that same bridge at Selma. Only this time in 2000, the President of the United States marched proudly across to proclaim to the world that a few brave men, women, and children had indeed changed us forever. John Lewis went on to be one of the greatest civil rights leaders, not just of our time, but of any time. Let's learn the great lessons of John Lewis and how they can apply to the gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender movement of our time. Congressman Lewis, thank you so much for joining us today. It's such a thrill for me.
Well, thank you so much. I'm delighted, very happy, and very pleased to be with you.
Now, Congressman, you know that you are one of the most important people in my life and in the lives of everyone in America and so many around the world that have really tried to make a difference. And I sometimes say to people, do you know who John Lewis is? And they say, yeah, I think so. He was that young man that marched with Martin Luther King. And I say, aren't you amazed that he still walks the earth with us? He's with us. We can know him. And I am, you know, you're just a miracle to me, just an amazing human being. So I want to thank you for your strength and for that resolve that wherever that came from, and we're going to explore a little bit of that today.
Well, thank you very much. You know, I grew up in rural Alabama, 50 miles from Montgomery, near a little place called Troy. I grew up very poor, in a very large family, but at an early age, I saw segregation and I saw racial discrimination. I tasted the bitter fruits of racism, and I didn't like it. But I heard the voice of Martin Luther King Jr. on old radio. And the words of Dr. King inspired me to do something. I used to go downtown, Elizabeth, to the little town of Troy, and I would see those signs that said white men, white women, colored women, white waiting, colored waiting. Used to go to the theater, and all of the little black children had to go upstairs to the balcony, and all of the white children went downstairs. I asked my mother, asked my father, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, why segregation, why racial discrimination? And they would say, that's the way it is. Don't get in the way, don't get in trouble. But the action of Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks and others inspired me to get in the way and get in trouble. And ever since then, I've been getting in the way and getting in trouble. But it's been good trouble, necessary trouble.
That's right. When you first came to Nashville, and you were one of the architects of really the, you know, sitting in the coffee houses and so on, and orchestrating that, and really studying nonviolent resistance for so many months before you did that. But when you came, you were 17 years old, and they said you were so shy and so rural and so innocent. But there must have been something so steely down in there that made you so strong to have lived the life that you've lived.
Well, I can recall I was 17 years old, had all of my hair, and a few pounds lighter, and I was quite shy. But at the same time, I made up my mind that I wanted to make a contribution, and I wanted to do something to change America. And change America, and especially the American South, to change it forever. And when I made a decision through the training of nonviolence, I was imbued with the philosophy, the discipline of nonviolence, that somehow by studying what Gandhi attempted to do in South Africa, what he accomplished in India, studying Thoreau and civil disobedience, studying what Martin Luther King Jr. was all about in Montgomery, I knew it was something that I wanted to be part of. So the day came when we had to make real our training.
That was February 13th, 1960.
To be exact, you have the date. Yeah. And we have to go there and sit in. Just sit there on the lunch counter all day, reading a book, doing your homework, or looking straight ahead. And someone would come up and spit on you, put a lighted cigarette out in your hair or down your backs, pull you off the lunch counter stool, beat you. And then we did that over and over again, just sitting there. And then that day came when we were not only beaten, but we were arrested and taken to jail. And on that day, February 27, 1960, when I was arrested, I felt free. Yeah. I felt liberated. I said, what else can you do to me? You beat me, you arrested me, and taken me to jail. What else can you do to me? Kill me. But I grew up while sitting down on those lunch counter stools. I became a different person, a different human being.
You know, you were counseling your parents when you were just a little boy, like 7, saying, you will never lift the weight of poverty off your back at 35 cents for 100 pounds of cotton. Like you already knew then. And so you make this big journey to Nashville, which was a huge journey from all the way from Troy. And you not only were jailed once, but you were jailed 40 times. And I sometimes think about what you confronted from Bull Connor and from Jim Clark and some of these other intense authority figures, and they would beat you and crack, heavy sticks over your head, and you would get back up and up and up again. Did you ever think that you would die from one of those blows?
Oh, on occasion, when we were beaten in Montgomery during the Freedom Ride, I was hit in the head with a wooden crate, left bloody and unconscious. I thought I would never recover. I thought I would die. And when I was beaten at the bridge in Selma, when we were attempting to march for the right to vote, I thought I saw death. I thought I was going to die. I thought it was the last protest. But I never gave up. I never lost faith, because it's in keeping with the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence. It is saying, in effect, that you have to get up and get back out there, and you continue to push and pull. And that the struggle for change is not a struggle that lasts for one day, or 1 week, or 1 month, or 1 year, of a lifetime. You continue to struggle to build this sense of community, this sense of one family, what I like to call one house, one people.
Yeah, you've called it the beloved community, and you've said, we build the beloved community by appealing to the conscience of those who would beat us, who would hate us, who would block us from the schoolhouse door. You're very educated about the gay movement. You've been one of the great voices to help people like me and anyone struggling to bring pure equality to our country, regardless of the experience of those different journeys. What do you think gay people have to learn about what you have learned in your life to really finally one day bring it home, that we can have equity as well?
I think more than anything else, the gay community must take a lesson from the civil rights movement. You must be prepared to struggle, be prepared to fight in a nonviolent fashion, and keeping in mind that it's not going to be easy. It may be very difficult. The journey is hard, it's long, but you have to be there day in and day out. Just get in the way. Get in trouble. Good trouble. Necessary trouble. I've taken a position, Elizabeth, that I fought too long and too hard against discrimination based on race and color, not to stand up and fight against discrimination in all forms, including discrimination based on sexual orientation. One thing that the gay community can learn from the civil rights movement is to be persistent and consistent, to hold on to your dreams. You don't necessarily put your fingers in the air and see which way the wind will blow. We didn't take polls during the height of the civil rights movement. We acted according to the dictates of our conscience and to our being. And today, I tell young people in the gay community, young people in the civil rights movement or the peace movement or whatever, that we didn't have a website. We didn't have a cellular telephone. We didn't have a fax machine. We used what we had. We made ourselves so necessary to the struggle. And as Dr. King would say, we were maladjusted. So people in the gay community should be maladjusted to a vicious and evil system that try to put people down because of their sexual orientation. We all are human. We must learn to live with each other.
Now, you were a little boy, and you probably early teenager when you first learned about the Montgomery bus boycott. You hear Dr. King. When did you first lay eyes on him?
I first heard of Dr. King when I was 15 years old in the 10th grade. I followed the drama of Montgomery. I listened to the radio, watched a little television here and there for my relatives who had a television, read the newspaper, and I wanted to be a part of that. I identified with Dr. King. I identified with Montgomery. He inspired me. In 1957, when I finished high school, I wrote a letter to Dr. King and told him I wanted to attend a college. It was an all-white school. It didn't admit black students. He wrote me back, sent me a round-trip Greyhound bus ticket, and invited me to come to Montgomery to meet with him. Wow. And I went off to school to Nashville, and I was there for about a semester, almost a semester. And during spring break, he got back in touch and suggested that I should come and see him. So in March of 1958, by this time I'm 18 years old, my father drove me to the Greyhound bus station one Saturday morning. I boarded the bus. I traveled from Troy, rural Alabama, to Montgomery. A young lawyer who had been a lawyer for Dr. King and Rosa Parks drove me to a local church where there was Dr. King and Reverend Rath Abernathy. I was so frightened. I didn't know what to say or what to do. I saw Martin Luther King Jr. standing behind a desk. And before I could say one word, he said, "Are you the boy from Troy? Are you John Lewis?" And I spoke up and said, "Dr. King, I'm John Robert Lewis." That changed my life, and it's been changed ever since. You get involved in a struggle, whether it's a struggle to end discrimination based on race, or whether it's a struggle to end discrimination based on sexual orientation. If you're in that struggle, you cannot get out of that struggle. People ask me from time to time, did you ever feel like giving up, dropping out? Never. Never, ever did I feel like giving up.
Tell me something about Dr. King that no one knows. You know, was he vulnerable with you? Did he ever say to you, you know, "John, I don't know. I feel lost. What do you think?" Was there ever any moments where, or was he would have been what then, about 29 or so?
He was only, you know, when he first got started, when Dr. King first got started, he was like 25, 26.
Right, very young.
And very young. He was only 11 years older than I am. He was a very young man, but he was a true believer. He really did believe in the goodness of human being. Yeah. He believes somehow, in some way, that you can reach the goodness of people. Just spend some time with them, talk with them, educate them, sensitize them, that there's some goodness. And you have to appeal to the goodness of your fellow human being. But he was a warm, very compassionate, very loving human being.
Was he funny?
He was funny, very
Is that
funny.
right?
Oh, once he asked me, did I preach? And I said, "Oh, yes, Dr. King, when I'm taking a shower." And he would just laugh, laugh, laugh. And I remember at the March on Washington in 1963, just before the march got underway, and there was 250,000 people, and there was some controversy about my speech. And at one point he said, he was reading a line, he said, "John, that doesn't sound like you. I know you. That's not you. That's somebody else." But he could be very serious, though. At one point, after I had been hurt during the march from Selma to Montgomery, and I was hospitalized in Selma, he came by to visit me, and he said, "John, we're going to make it. We're going to make it from Selma to Montgomery, and the Voting Rights Act will be passed." Then on another occasion, when we were marching from Selma to Montgomery, because it took us 5 days to walk the 50 miles, a storm came. It started raining. He had a little cap on his head. He took the cap off of his head and put it on my head and said, "You've been hurt. You need to protect your head." But he would say things like, if you're driving down the highway in Alabama or Mississippi or someplace in Georgia and see some hole-in-the-wall restaurant, and he said, "Let's stop and get something to eat. If we get arrested, at least we would go to jail on a full stomach."
That's great. That's great. Now, tell me about your relationship with Bayard Rustin and then Dr. King's. Bayard Rustin was a gay man, pretty well known, amazing organizer. And by the way, outside of Bayard Rustin, were there other gay folks you knew in the movement, sort of late 50s, early 60s?
Bayard Rustin probably was one of the best thinkers, one of the best planners in the movement. I would never forget it. When we met to plan the March on Washington, in July 1963. I was 23 years old. I was in a meeting with A. Philip Randolph, the dean, the old man of the black leader, the dean of black leadership. There was Roy Wilkin of the NAACP, Whitney Young of the Urban League, James Former of CORE, along with Dr. King. And there were people, some of the leaders, didn't want Bayard Rustin to be the leader, the chair of the March on Washington, because they knew that he was gay. And they thought some of the Southern politicians, some of the Southern senators would use that against the movement. And there was this unbelievable debate. Bayard not been in the room, but there was a caucus between Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., James Former, and myself. And we said we would select A. Philip Randolph. And we knew if we had selected A. Philip Randolph as the chair, A. Philip Randolph would then turn to Bayard Rustin to be his deputy. So Bayard Rustin became the leader, not in terms of chair, but he became the leader. He became the organizer of the March on Washington that brought more than 250,000 people together. So we didn't, those, especially young people, and individuals like Dr. King and Former of CORE, we didn't question Bayard Rustin's sexuality. Right. We only wanted somebody who could organize the unorganized, mobilize the people that need to be mobilized. There was somebody who can plan and think, and he was the person who did it.
Now, what do you think Dr. King would say today about the way that, you know, gays are sort of being conveniently sort of scapegoated, you know, as a very, very precise tactic of the right in this country?
Well, first of all, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would be very, very disappointed to see, if he could speak to us today, and I think in so many ways he is speaking to us, to many of us. But if he could speak today, he would say, what the larger society has done is wrong. It is dead wrong. To use members of the gay community, or to use any group, to try to cover up other problems. Dr. King would say, we all are brothers and sisters, that we all are members of the same family, and that we don't have a right to discriminate against any person, any human being, because of their sexuality or their sexual orientation.
Now, didn't there come a moment when Dr. King was very, very pressured and he accepted Bayard Rustin's resignation briefly and then took it back, I think? Well, I don't know if it was leading up to the march or just after.
Well, during a phase in the movement, it was not only some question about Bayard Rustin sexuality, but the overriding concern was whether it was his politics. There were people who were trying to red bait the movement and suggest that the movement was coming in inspired.
And you faced that too.
We face it. There were people who said that John Lewis may not be a communist, but he used quasi-communist tactics. And people tried to suggest that we were being dictated to by someone in Moscow. But when you have segregation and racial discrimination, when people have been put down because of their sexual orientation, you don't need someone from another planet or from another town or another country, someone from New York or Washington, or Moscow or Paris or London to tell you that you're being discriminated against. Your very being, your very essence tell you that you're being discriminated against or you're being put down because of your race, because of your sexual orientation.
What do you make of the sort of rise of at least a group? They seem to be probably louder than their numbers, but a number of African-American ministers now kind of taking up the cause of the right to say, you know, gay marriage is wrong. Inevitably, when you peel back, there's some relationship there. What do you make of this? Because, you know, Congressman, we can't be guided by polls, but every poll I've ever seen, African Americans are more tolerant, more accepting, frankly, more embracing of difference in our nation than, for example, Caucasians. So what do you make of these ministers in these days?
In my view, many of these ministers are out of step and out of tune with the feeling of the great majority of the African American community. Someone put it a different way in relation to civil rights, and I think it can be put in the same way in relation to gay rights. These religious leaders represent a minority, and they are a tail light rather than a headlight. I think African American people, whether they be religious or non-religious, they have maybe another sense. They have an antenna. They know when people have been put down. They know what it is to be discriminated against. They know because what has happened to them, individual, what happened to their mothers and fathers, their grandparents and their great-grandparents. They understand the history. They understand the legacy. And that the same people who try to put down members of the gay community are the same people that discriminate against African American. So African American is our makeup. It's part of our DNA.
Exactly.
To be a little more tolerant, to be a little more understanding, to reach out and say, no, that's not the way to go. Let's live and let live.
Tell me, do you miss those days of struggle?
Oh, I miss the days when things seemed so simple and when there was such a burning desire for people to get in the way. It seemed like things were so clear. And there was a sense that we have an obligation, that we had a mission, that we had a mandate to do. And we used to sing a song or two, and I cannot sing, but we used to say, I'm going to do what the Spirit said do. And we did it. We didn't wait for someone to tell us to do. We just did it. I used to believe, Elizabeth, that the only real and true integration that existed in America, that the only part of the beloved community that existed was that within the movement itself. So when I go to a human rights dinner, when I'm with many of my gay friends, sisters and brothers, it is the essence of people coming together to lay down the burden of differences and to create this sense of community, the beloved community.
What is it about the struggle in South Africa that led the Archbishop Desmond Tutu to the same conclusion, that you cannot draw a circle and leave anyone out?
Well, I think Bishop Tutu and others learn from their own struggle as we learn from our struggle here. When you try to build a wall, when you try to draw a circle, build a fence, you discriminate. It's an affront to the dignity of all human beings. You cannot do that. You cannot do that and be true to your humanity, to your humanness. You got to be all-inclusive, all-encompassing.
What do you see among young people today? Do you wish you saw more fire?
I think young people today are learning. As I travel around America and speak to high school students, middle school students, and college students, they're learning. They're being educated. They're becoming a little more sensitive. But sometimes I feel like our young people are too quiet. And it's time for them to make a little noise. It's time for them to find a way to get in the way and to stand up and fight with passion. I just think the young people in America and young people in the world can leave this world a little better. We've made unbelievable changes. The technology is so amazing. But when it comes to just basic human relations, dealing with our fellow human beings, learning to live together as brothers and sisters, learning to live together as one family, as one people, one house, one community, the beloved community. We still have a distance to go.
That's true. Tell me, what are we going to do to rile up the Democratic Party? I sometimes just go, come on, everybody, wake up. We got a lot going on in this world that's a problem.
I think Democrats and people of goodwill and people that are concerned about the future of America and the future of this planet, the future of this little piece of real estate we call the Earth, we got to get out there. We cannot afford to be spectators. We got to be engaged. We got to get out in the arena and stand up and fight. I don't think my generation would take what is going on now. Sometime I wish we could see the spirit, the fire, the passion of Martin Luther King Jr. again, calling on people to get out. You know, Dr. King used to say from time to time, when a man straighten up his back, nobody can ride you. Too many of us today, too many of us are not standing up straight. We need to find a way to get in the way. Find a way to say, this is what we want, this is what we need, and this is what we're going to get. In America, if we believe in our democratic ideas, the country, the government belongs to the people, not to a political party, not to a president or to members of Congress, but to the people. And we have to get back out there and say, this is where we're going. We didn't get the Civil Rights Act or the Voting Rights Act overnight, but we struggled. Some of us bled. Some of us were beaten. Some of us were arrested and went to jail. And some of us died. We got to continue to struggle and pace ourselves for the long haul.
You once forgave one of the sheriffs that really, I think it was from Bloody Sunday, with that crate that hit your head. What brought about those circumstances of forgiveness?
Well, it's very much in keeping with the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence. To have the capacity, to have the ability to forgive. Hate is too heavy a burden to bear. When Sheriff Clark pushed me, beat me, I was hit in the head. When I was touched with an electric cab rider, it hurt. But those are physical pain. The psychological pain would have been much greater. You don't have time to be bitter. You don't have time to be hostile. You don't have time to hate. And always like to think about the people that engage in the violence. You know, at one time they were innocent little children, little babies, and something happened to them along the way. We all are victims of a vicious system, and we have to change that system. So I don't have any hate. I don't hold any malice toward the people that beat me and jailed me.
Are there any young people that have come to you and said, Congressman, I'm on your staff, I'm gay, and I want you to know that I'm gay, and do people come out to you and say, I want guidance?
The young people on my staff, young people in Atlanta, in Washington, interns, I come in contact with people all the time. And that's my only advice is be yourself. Be happy with yourself.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This was amazing for me, just a gift. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for those kind words of introduction. I am very pleased, happy, and just delighted to be here tonight. Oh, how I wish that my friend and my brother Al Gore was president of the United States. Chipper Gore would have been an extraordinary first lady. Let me start by thanking the people in this room, the people who work for and support the Human Rights Campaign, for all that you do to promote justice, equality, and acceptance. And in particular, let all of us thank Elizabeth Birch for being a leader, a true leader in the never-ending struggle for human rights and human dignity. The great educator Horace Mann once said, "We should be ashamed to die before we have won some victory for humanity." As someone who has dedicated the greater part of my life to the struggle for human rights and human dignity, I have seen Elizabeth make a difference. I've seen her on the front line of the struggle for gay and lesbian Americans, for all Americans. I've seen her win not just one victory, but many victories for all humanity. 40 years ago, a different segment of our society was engaged in a similar struggle. 40 years ago, people from across the country joined together, black and white, old and young, Jew and Gentile, gay and straight. We joined together to fight against Jim Crow and for fundamental human and civil rights for black Americans. Thanks to our work, thanks to countless and nameless individuals who marched, sat in, and stood up for what is right and fair, our nation experienced nothing less than a nonviolent revolution under the rule of law. A revolution of values, a revolution of ideas. Today, the battle lines have shifted. While the scars and stains of racism remain deeply embedded in our society, we have come a mighty long way in 40 years. Jim Crow is dead. Racial discrimination is no longer legal. We live in a different world. We live in a better world, and we are a better people. Unfortunately, it is a world in which discrimination under the rule of law still exists. If you're gay, if you're lesbian, if you're bisexual or transgender, you do not have the same rights as your fellow Americans. You cannot marry, you face discrimination in the workplace, you cannot serve openly in our armed forces. For a nation that prides itself on liberty, equality, and justice, this is a travesty, it is a disgrace. To make matters worse, many of our elected officials do not see the hypocrisy of the policies they promote, but they wrap themselves in the flag and crusade for freedom abroad. They deny fundamental human rights and dignity to their own citizens right here at home. That is why we are lucky to have groups like the Human Rights Campaign and individuals like Elizabeth Birch. You are at the forefront of the fight for civil and human rights in the 21st century. The Human Rights Campaign is at the forefront to promote the rights of gays, lesbians, bisexual, and transgender individuals. And it is one of the most effective lobbyists on Capitol Hill. Thank you for your work. Keep on doing the good work and hang in there. HRC has taken the debate about sexual orientation out of the closet and into the living room. Only through open, fair, and honest dialogue will our society overcome the irrational fears and prejudices that divide us. Because of Elizabeth Birch and HRC have walked the walk, mainstream America is starting to talk the talk. Keep the people talking, keep the people debating the issue. My brothers and sisters, throughout our nation, loving and caring people understand that we are all brothers and sisters. Regardless of race, religion, sex, or sexual orientation, we are all human beings. They're beginning to recognize that the civil rights movement and the gay rights movement are fights for the very ideas upon which our nation was founded: equality, justice, and freedom. You are fighting for the same principles as our founding fathers and mothers, the same principles as the civil rights movement. You are freedom fighters, fighting for the freedom to marry, to serve your country, to work your job, and to love whomever you want to. You know, people fall in love, want to get married, and live in peace with each other. Each and every one of us should be free to do that. It is just that simple. Sometimes I wonder, what is it in these people who claim to be so holy, so righteous, so pious, that they want to disturb others so much? We all must learn to live and let live. As it says in our Declaration of Independence, all men and women are created equal. Rich and poor, black and white, gay and straight, we are all created equal. Abraham Lincoln was born poor, and he was created equal. Martin Luther King Jr. was born black, and he was created equal. Elizabeth Birch was born gay, and she was created equal. And as equal, we have the same right. We have the right to marry, to serve, to work, and to love and be loved. As human beings, as God's children, these are our birthrights. And we will fight together for our rights. Now tonight, I want to close with a story from my childhood, a parable for my nation's struggle to become the accepting, loving, progressive society that it yearns to be. When I was growing up 50 miles from Montgomery, Alabama, I started a little town called Troy. I had an aunt by the name of Seneva, and my Aunt Seneva lived in what we call a shotgun house. I was born in a shotgun house. My Aunt Seneva didn't have a green manicure lawn. She had a simple, plain dirt yard. And sometime at night, you can look up through the ceiling of this old shotgun house, through the tin roof, and count the stars. When it would rain, she would get a pail and catch the rainwater. From time to time, she would walk out into the woods and take branches from a dogwood tree and tie these branches together and make a broom. And she called that broom the brush broom. And she would sweep this dirt yard clean 2 and 3 times a week, but especially on a Friday or Saturday, because she wanted that dirt yard to look very good during the weekend. For those of you here tonight may not know what a shotgun house is or what it might look like. In the nonviolent sense, a shotgun house is an old house with a tin roof where you can bounce a basketball through the front door and it will go straight out the back door. Or in the military sense, a shotgun house would be an old house with a tin roof where you can fire a shotgun through the front door and the bullets will go straight through the back door. My Aunt Seneva lived in a shotgun house. But one Saturday afternoon, a group of my sisters and brothers and a few of my first cousins, about 12 or 15 of us young children, were playing in my Aunt Seneva dirt yard. And an unbelievable storm came up. The wind started blowing, the thunder started rolling, the lightning started flashing, and the rain started beating on the tin roof of this old shotgun house. One became terrified, started crying. She thought this old house was going to blow away. She got all of us little children together and told us to hold hands. The wind continued to blow, the thunder continued to roll, the lightning continued to flash, and the rain continued to beat on the tin roof of this old shotgun house. And when one corner of this old house appeared to be lifting from its foundation, mine had us to walk to that corner to try to hold the house down with our little bodies. When the other side appeared to be lifted, had us to walk to that side to try to hold that house down with our little bodies. We were little children walking with the wind, but we never, ever left the house. Members of the Human Rights Campaign, the wind may blow, the thunder may roll, the lightning may flash, and the rain may beat on our old house, but don't leave the house. Call it the house of the Human Rights Campaign. Call it the house of Washington. Call it the house of Atlanta. Call it the house of New York. Call it the American house. Call it the world house. We must never, ever leave the house. Maybe, just maybe, our forefathers and our foremothers all came to this land in different ships, but we're all in the same boat now. I am proud to have Elizabeth Birch and the Human Rights Campaign in my boat and in my house. I am proud to join hands with you. I am so proud to join hands with you, to use our bodies, use our mind, use our skills and talent to hold down our little house, working together, struggling together. We will continue to win victories for humanity, to build a new and better world, to build what I like to call the beloved community, a truly interracial and integrated democracy, a nation at peace with itself, a nation where we can be the person we were born to be, openly, happily, and peaceful. So I said to each of you tonight, don't give up. Don't give up. Don't give in. Don't get lost in a sea of despair. We won in 1960 when we were sitting in. We won in 1961 when we went on the Freedom Ride. We won in 1963 during the March on Washington. We won at Selma in 1965, and you are going to win. Stay in the house. We are one house. We are one people. We are one family. So as members of the Human Rights Campaign, as supporter of this great effort, walk with the wind, stay with the house, keep your eyes on the prize, and let the spirit of equality, justice, and freedom be your guide. We are one people, we are one family, we are one house. Thank you very much.
So there you have it, John Lewis, a man with the deepest rudder on earth. And we learned some things today. First of all, we learned that John Lewis truly believes that Dr. Martin Luther King would have stood with us and spoken out. Coretta Scott King has said this many times, but it's verified by a man who also marched in the streets of Montgomery and Selma, over bridges and off buses to face dogs, cattle prods, and all kinds of beating. John Lewis has no reason not to tell the truth. He also told us, get in the way. Don't give up and don't give out. He's prodding us on to get out there and fight for what we believe. You get the feeling listening to John Lewis that he was guided by something much larger than himself, something I truly believe about the gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender community of our time. So go get out there.